Hi, it's me again. I had to rush a little bit on the last video, so I wanted to finish up with a couple more details. First of all, let me mention that vocabulary alternates are an advanced feature and probably should be used with some guidance from Todd or me for the time being. But last time I showed how to do the semantic representation for the vocabulary alternate, and I showed how you can have multiple sentences in a vocabulary alternate. So these first two sentences have the word earthquake, but the second two sentences express this in a more simple way. The ground began to shake, but Yahweh was not in this event. Okay, so I mentioned the complexity level, and I want to show you that. If you start using a complex term and you haven't already entered it, you'll be prompted to add it. In this case, I had already added it. So I've gone to ontology and lexicon, ontology, and then nouns. Whoops. So you can also change to nouns here. It should be objects or nouns. And then let's go to E. So there's this drop-down menu here, and I pick letter E for echo. And so you see here I entered earthquake. Now, the semantic level of this for the vocabulary alternate to work properly should be level 3. And it looks like you can change it, because if I do a right-click on this row, if I do a right-click, okay, let me use my other mouse. Okay, if I do a right click, then there is edit this concept semantic complexity level. So if I click that, so this is, I see what happened. I had my voice recognition on. Okay, I turned that off. So normally, you would have to change that to 3, like I've done here. I've entered 3, and then you click OK. The problem here is that unless you're Todd, you can't write a new word into the ontology and define the semantic complexity level, at least at this point in time. So if I clicked OK, but if I do another right click, go back to check that, you'll see that it's still not defined. So even though I entered it and clicked OK, it's not defined. So really for the vocabulary alternate to work, this has to be set up to level 3. Red means it isn't defined yet. The complexity level isn't defined. I think I've mentioned this earlier. Brown is usually for proper nouns, and the yellowish is for a regular word. And a complex word, but level 2, not level 3, is in magenta. The blue are supposed to be semantic primitives. Those are supposed to be even more common than the yellow, but these look to be incorrect here because these are proper nouns. I don't think they should be blue. Okay, there's another thing that you have to do, well, to understand how the vocabulary alternates work. So I'm going to go to Generator, Lexicon and Grammar Development. And down here in the bottom right, you see complex concepts. And by clicking on that button, you can choose what complex concepts you want to be used by your audience for this language. So here in the upper left, below the ontology and lexicon menu item, you see audiences. If I click on that, you can see the audiences that are defined for this system. And in this case, for analyzer language, right now there isn't too much difference. We have a choice of dynamic translation versus literal translation. That's because for some of our alternates, we can mark it as literal or more dynamic. But suppose we've chosen an audience. So you can do that by doing this drop down up in the upper left, current audience. So here I have audience number 4 selected. So let's click OK. And then go down into the bottom right. And if I click on complex concepts, then it will allow me to choose whether those complex concepts are used for this audience. And notice here that if I scroll down, okay, so far there isn't a word earthquake here. And that's because the semantic complexity level has not yet been defined. So we can't even choose to use earthquake or choose not to use it. So if this is a simple version that doesn't use much complex vocabulary, we would want for this audience, currently we're on audience number 4, we would want none of these to be selected because we don't want to use any complex vocabulary. This would be what you'd use perhaps for an unchurched children audience. You can either select individually, like here I selected ancestor, maybe the children should know ancestor for your language, or you can click at the top on the numeral 4 and it will add all of those complex concepts. And if I click it again, it takes them all away. So I didn't want to change anything, I'll just click cancel. So that shows how you can define for a particular audience the complex concepts that you want to use. And if earthquake were had its semantic complexity level defined, we could choose to switch it off for this audience, and then it would use the ground shook instead of there was an earthquake. But now, since we can't define earthquake to be a complex concept, it's automatically using that, and that's why it generated there was an earthquake when we first generated this in the last video. So that's a little bit more about using vocabulary alternates. Thank you for listening today.